You're listening to Discutafel podcast, your green audio on eco-friendly gardening and a sustainable lifestyle. How nice to meet you again at Discutafel podcast. Welcome! This is episode 131, which we released on February the 2nd, 2023. You hear the voice of Ivonne Smith. What's up in this show? This episode is one part of a rather extensive series of shows around Milner Gardens and Woodland in Canada. I visited the place in August 22. You can listen to each single episode separately, or one of them, or all of them, in the sequence of your own choice. In case you need an explanation on a name mentioned or so, please go to other episodes in the series or contact us at Discutafel. Milner Gardens and Woodland is an estate on the east coast of Vancouver Island, along the Strait of Georgia, and near the charming town of Qualicum Beach. It's 28 hectares in size, which is the equivalent of 70 acres. Most of the site is woodland. There's also a garden, and the family house, of course, and it's open to the public, so we went there. In this series, you get an audio impression of Milner Gardens and Woodland, and you'll learn a thing or two about the people behind the estate, the natural vegetation, the gardening style, the house with the stunning view, the special rhododendron collection, and the educational programs. And during making this series, I learned a lot too. The estate is a multifunctional place. It has links to British aristocracy, once innovative garden styles, and modern ways to protect hybrids and nature. The more I read about it, the more interesting it got, and I got convinced that Discutafel should share the findings and thoughts with you, podcast listener, in separate shows, each with a special theme. There we go with this episode.
Discu knowledge.
In this episode, we'll mainly talk about and walk in and around the garden and the house of Milner Gardens and Woodland on Vancouver Island in Canada. The home was originally built for the sister and mother of Mr. General Noel Money, whose family owned tea plantations in Ceylon. But the property was bought in 1937 by a lawyer by the name of Horatio Ray Milner. He was a renowned philanthropist and businessman. His second wife, Veronica Milner, named the property Long Distance, partly because the estate was so far away from her old home in England and Ireland. The home itself was designed along the lines of a Ceylonese tea plantation house and expanded over the years. It looks a bit like a cottage, but it is actually a very big house. It originally had 7 bedrooms and 7 bathrooms, including servants' quarters upstairs. Each main bedroom had an entrance to the garden, and servants could come in and tend to the baths without bothering anyone. Every bedroom has a walk-in closet too, with built-in drawers, and all the windows have pull-down screens. And the view on the bay is magnificent, as I discover in this episode. We end the coverage near the pool, and we started when I have just discovered the garden gate coming out of the woodland garden.
Discu coverage.
Oh, there's the garden gate. Finally, we're in the garden, and we are welcomed by the grand fir, a big tree, a member of the pine family. So some of the trees have names on it in English and in Latin. A very important tree here is the coastal Douglas fir, the Pseudotsuga menzies. You see him a lot of times here in the woods. And opposite of this tree is the western red cedar, the Thuja plicata. Perhaps when you're not familiar with these big trees, you confuse them, but as soon as you see them standing next to each other, you see the differences. The bark is very different. I'll make a picture of both trees, the barks of both trees, and I'll put them in the accompanying show note in this podcast episode of Discutafel podcast, so you know the difference without looking above your head, only by looking at the bark of these trees. After passing the gardener's cottage, I have entered the main house with the tea room and the dressing room. And now I'm outside, stepping outside into the back garden, and I'm stunned by the view across the bay with the mountains far, far away and a pebble beach just in front of us. It's stunning, it's beautiful, and I think Veronica has stood here many times and enjoyed the view. It's a view across the bay to the coastal mountains and the Gulf Islands. And there's a sign here which names the various mountain peaks and islands and creeks, the fjords, you could say, around these islands. On this day, it's cloudy, so the highest peaks are not visible at the moment, but it's still a very pretty sight with various shapes of grey and blue. Just in front of us, the so-called Strait of Georgia. On the western side of the gardens, boardwalks lead you to a steep slope, and when you look downwards you see the forest floor and a big tree which rises high and high above you. I think this is a good place to get to know the original woodland of this part of Canada, British Columbia, Vancouver Island, the coastal side, with the ferns and the big trees and the densely overgrown woodland floor. Just in between the trees, I can look to the Strait of Georgia and see the waves. You probably hear the waves as well, and a small pebble beach. And about 30-40 kilometers along, further away, I see one of the islands. The dominant color you see, the most important color you see here, is green. Green leaves of the rhododendrons, the ferns, the azaleas, the trees. I was wrong. The most important color I see now is brown. The brown of the red deer with her young, and they're both nibbling away leaves from the trees and the plants. What would Veronica have thought about this? Next to the plant sales and the gift shop is the rectangular swimming pool. At least it's called a pool. I suppose they have been swimming in the pool. It's surrounded by roses, and inside the pool are some plants, some water plants. Back in the studio again. After my visit, I discovered that the gift shop was formerly the Milner's pool house. It underwent a major renovation prior to opening in 2001.
Discufinish.
Getting interested to know more about my adventures in Canada with gardens, I suggest go to our episode list, our podcast episode list, and you'll find it on your playlist on the streaming service you're using or on your podcast app. Depending on the date you hear this show, you will find one or more episodes on Canada. We also publish blogs on the subject on our website Discutafel.nl. Thanks for listening to Discutafel podcast. We publish new green audio for you at least every 4 weeks, in Dutch or in English. The release date of the next English episode will be soon, but is not yet known. Just stay tuned. And in the meantime, let's go outside. And until next time.